Welcome one and all to my review of the most maligned James Bond film of them all, Die Another Day. I'll just come right out and say that I don't hate this film in any way. There is no denying that it's a mighty trouble production, with visible flaws sprouting out the yazoo. Yet again, the world has not enough continued the reliable trend of Bond raking in the dough, and things looked about as bright as possible for the series going into the next millennium. Somewhere along the lines though, the producers seemed to overcomplicate the matter by making sure that this, the 20th James Bond feature, was released in 2002 on the series' 40th anniversary, and contained copious nods to all the previous entries. Not only that, but they felt the action had to be more outrageous than ever. The stunts bigger, the pacing faster, and the characters stronger, but unfortunately in all the wrong ways. Looking back on Pierce Brosnan's tenure, there's an absurd sense of escalation about the whole affair, and it all culminates in spectacular fashion with this train wreck of a flick. Everything about Die Another Day is louder and flashier than what came before, and it's only right that I run through the whole zany adventure to see whether it deserves its frequent title of the worst James Bond film ever, and I promise I'll try not to make it just me shitting in this movie for 40 minutes or so. We start off this time round with anything but the normal gun barrel sequence we've become accustomed to. This overly produced Bond theme and wacky CGI bullet firing straight at the screen are only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Die Another Day's problems, but they certainly give us a hint at which direction things are headed. So we open up in drab and dreary North Korea as we see Bond and a few accomplices approach an island riding a pretty damn intimidating set of waves. This stuff is all in camera and looks great, but the surfing just doesn't seem like something James Bond would do, and I have real trouble imagining Brosnan catching that wave. On land, Bond sets up a gadget to redirect a helicopter to his location, where he assumes the identity of an arms dealer who has a scheduled meeting nearby. How the hell Bond knew what outfit this fella would be wearing is anyone's guess. He boards a helicopter and sticks a chunky as hell block of C4 into the diamond case that he'll be trading to the Koreans. Upon arriving in the demilitarised zone, he soon comes face to face with Colonel Moon, who's just recently beat the ever-loving piss out of his anger therapist. Bond is hardly there 2 minutes when he gets his cover blown, thanks to a message that Moon's henchman Zal receives over his mobile phone. So the case of diamonds are exchanged into Moon's possession before he goes psycho, destroying Bond's helicopter and ordering his execution, as he knows fine well he's a British spy.
How do you propose to kill me now, Mr. Bond?
Thanks to some pre-planning, Bond sets off the C4 explosives in the nick of time, blowing the case to smithereens and embedding a good deal of the diamonds in Zal's face. Shit well and truly goes down as we see Terminator Bond grab an Uzi and blow up everything in sight before jumping aboard one of the many hovercrafts in the vicinity and taking off after Colonel Moon. I actually really love this hovercraft chase, and pretty much all of the pre-title sequence to be honest. You can't deny that this film starts off pretty damn strong, with a gritty look into North Korean territory, followed by an all-explosive chase through a minefield. David Arnold returns to score the film, and although I feel some of his tracks are a little too cluttered for their own good this time round, I'm definitely a huge fan of this hovercraft chase music, especially this pounding drum beat that sounds more like something out of a Prodigy song. We get some fantastic practical stunts, but then things take a turn for the worse when Bond leaps aboard Moon's hovercraft and we get some rather wonky green screen backdrops. It's a shame as it leaves a sour taste in your mouth after all the greatness that came before. Eventually Bond steers the craft straight off a cliff, and although he may dive to safety, it appears Colonel Moon has met his demise by soaring off of a model waterfall. Job done, mission over, except this time it's not that simple. Moon's father soon shows up and takes Bond prisoner for all the mayhem he's caused here. And here comes my first of what I'm guessing will be many hot takes of this review, but I particularly love the way we are launched straight into the opening credits as Bond's 14-month-long torture commences. Madonna's glitzy pop number is an absolutely terrible song by all rights, and it is no place anywhere near a James Bond film. But the actual visuals that accompany the credits are simply amazing. The different images that appear during the theme song always link into the central theme of the film, but this is the first time we've had a full-on continuation of the story play in the background as the graphics seamlessly interact. Again, I cannot defend the song in any way, and it damn near ruins the whole sequence, but a handy solution presents itself thanks to the mute button in your TV remote. On with the show then, and I can't go any further without talking about Bond's lengthy captivity and torture. From the outside looking in, this choice appears to be one of the ballsiest that the series has ever pulled off, but unfortunately the writers never actually go anywhere with this decision. Bond doesn't necessarily emerge from this torture a darker person, and we don't learn anything about him, except that he'd rather die in prison than divulge any information, but we could have guessed that anyway. Where was I? General Moon has had more than enough of his defiance, and it looks like he's been transported out to no man's land for an execution. This isn't the case of course, as Bond is instead ordered to walk over a misty bridge where he soon finds out he's being traded for Zhao, who oddly still has a load of the diamonds lodged in his face. Guess he liked them. I jest, but honestly Rick Yoon's Zhao is one of the highlights of the film for me. His appearance, especially later on, is fairly memorable for a henchman. He's definitely up to scratch with what's came before, especially in this era. Bond swears that he'll get revenge, but for now I think he's just happy to see some familiar faces. Hope we get a good look though, because he's immediately sedated and taken on board an MI6 medical ship for some long overdue R&R. M soon comes aboard and acts like Bond personally shat in her kettle.
You're no use to anyone now.
She informs him that they've suspected he was leaking information under duress to the North Koreans and that his 00 status has been rescinded following evaluation. I get that M feels she's been let down here, but I've always felt that they made her far too strict in this scene. She knows fine well that Bond is the best agent at her disposal, and it seems far-fetched that she would just suspend him without properly listening to his theories about being double-crossed by a British agent. Anyway, he's basically just left in that ship to rot, so comes up with the idea of reliving his brutal 14 months as a prisoner in order to stop his heart. Wait, what? This is the first of many times in this film that we are witness to the completely impossible rather than the highly implausible. Up until this point I would say that Die Another Day has been pretty first rate. The action is good, the visuals were gritty, but this small scene just starts to throw things off course a little. So Bond escapes MI6 custody and somehow swims to Hong Kong harbour. My guess is that this ship wasn't stationed at the shore, so he must have regained a lot of energy after being resuscitated to make that swim. Upon dragging himself ashore like something from the deep, he casually waltzes into a swanky hotel, bare-chested and dripping wet, looking like he owns the place. Being honest, I love this scene, and although I couldn't imagine Connery or Moore pulling this trick off, it still screams classic Bond. Naturally, James Bond is recognised and given the best suite in the hotel, along with every shirt in the laundry room by the looks of it. They also must have sent up a barber to him, because if Bond gave himself that haircut with an electric razor, he's in their own line of work. What's genuinely sad about this scene though is that it marks the premature end of Bond's whole captivity storyline. His torture is all but forgotten from here on out, and we have our witty, charming 007 back with not a single lesson learned from his brutal past. It's yet another great idea completely wasted, like Renard in the last film. Anyway, Bond catches his pervy old Chinese colleague Mr. Chang about to perv on him from behind a two-way mirror.
You think I haven't always known your Chinese intelligence, Chang?
And so forces some information out of the man. He soon gets his passport and credentials all in order and learns that Zhao was currently located in Cuba, so it's off to sunny Havana we go. I regularly forget that Bond is meant to have gone rogue at this point in the movie. He's helped quite easily along his vendetta as if it's just a regular mission in the field, and it doesn't give the impression that we're watching a man hell-bent on revenge. As soon as Bond arrives in Havana, he meets up with yet another contact who happily helps him in his mission, this time in the form of Raoul, who has still got some friends in the loop so he can get all the information needed about Zhao. Bond helps himself to this fella's gun and binoculars before really taking the piss and asking for some free transport as well. Of course, because he's 007, he gets anything he wants, but I do adore this next brief shot of Bond catching some air as he cruises down the highway in that classy open top car. He turns up to a bar to have a quick peek at Los Organos, which is the island Raoul's contact informed him that Zhao's currently on. His focus is shifted though as we get to meet our leading Bond girl in the form of Ursula Andress as Honey Rider, or so the film would love to make you think. No, believe it or not, this is just an extremely subtle homage to Dr. No, and the real Bond girl for this outing is Jinx, played by the award-winning Halle Berry. She's absolute shite in this film.
Wow. Now there's a mouthful.
I'm not sure if Jinx is my least favourite Bond girl of all time, but she's most certainly in the running. The script doesn't help her, but I think the real reason I dislike her so much is that the screenwriters try and push her to the forefront of the story. Giving her just about as much screen time as Bond by the end just rubs me the wrong way. Anywho, we're treated to some of the most on-the-nose, god-awful dialogue ever to be uttered.
So what do predators do when the sun goes down?
They feast like there's no tomorrow.
before a pretty unnecessary sex scene commences, where we see Bond surely empty his whole load in one sitting after 14 months in a lonely prison cell. The next morning, Bond wakes up to find the roles reversed as Jinx has left him in the middle of the night. He peers outside to see that she has admittance papers to the island and is making her way over there now. What follows is one of my favourite moments as Bond batters some bastard South African bloke, stuffs him in a wheelchair and nicks his admittance papers, which we seen him receive the previous day. We find out that there's a gene therapy clinic situated on the island, and Jinx is pretending to be a patient just to find out what the hell this madcap doctor is up to. After he gets a bit touchy-feely, Jinx is heard quite enough and just shoots the guy right there behind his desk. I mean, fair enough, he was a slimy bastard, but this execution seems pretty cold-hearted. It's revealed Zhao is presently getting gene therapy and in the midst of being transformed into a Caucasian German fella. I think we need to take a brief moment to comprehend just how fucking stupid this plotline is. So people can go into this clinic as one person and come out a few months later as someone completely different. What? Different voice, different skin, different organs and different DNA? What a pile of absolute unequivocal nonsense. Anyway, after getting rid of his South African pal, Bond soon finds Zhao laying under a psychedelic mask, listening to the German language when the red mist descends and he provokes him into a fight. Bond unintentionally grabs Zhao's bullet necklace before using a giant magnet to his advantage. Doesn't really help though, as Zhao escapes and Bond gets blindsided by a bomb that Jinx had set up after murdering that sleazebag doctor. Both Bond and Jinx try their best to stop Zhao from leaving the island but fail miserably and get trapped at the edge of a cliff. Jinx strangely starts stripping off in front of the guards before dropping backwards into a pitiful CGI dive. When I said they both get trapped, the guards only seem to give a fuck about her as they just leave Bond up there with a gun cocked and loaded in hand. Oh well, it gives Bond time to discover that there are a few diamonds in the necklace Zhao was wearing. I wonder if they fell out his face. We'll never know, but instead we find out via Raoul that the diamonds contain a laser signature of a Mr. Gustav Graves, some British billionaire who popped up out of nowhere after recently discovering a wealth of diamonds in Iceland. Bond now has his next person of interest, as it turns out that these diamonds are also chemically identical to African conflict ones. So it's off to London we go, via the Clash's London Calling and a blink and you'll miss it cameo from Roger Moore's daughter.
Your drink, sir.
Lucky I asked for a shave.
As Bond travels to meet this super rich adventurer in the flesh. All the while M is getting filled in about Bond's rogue mission by NSA Chief Falco, oddly portrayed by Michael Madsen. Just always found it weird that he plays an even-tempered ally in a 007 film. He would surely be much more suited as a villain, especially around this era. His role is extremely brief though, as we instead see Gustav Graves parachute out of a plane over Buckingham Palace, and yet another unmistakable callback, this time to The Spy Who Loved Me. It turns out Graves is about to get knighted by the Queen as we see him sneer his way through a handful of pishy questions by reporters. Toby Stephens really does inject a great deal of life into this unbelievable caricature. As you're all probably well aware, Graves is meant to be Colonel Moon from the pre-titles after receiving what I imagine must have been a hell of a lot of gene therapy sessions. His transformation is helped by the fact that he's also about 7 inches taller than William Lee and spouts a plummy British accent.
I never get furious. As they say in fencing, what's the point?
It's a proper load of bollocks, but I do like the small detail that Moon is meant to have based his rude, sarcastic identity in James Bond. It doesn't help with the believability of it all, but it's a nice little touch. We get a hint that Graves is about to reveal some massive ecological project before we're whisked away to the Blades Fencing Club for a confrontation with the man himself. It's here Madonna makes a pretty unnecessary appearance and formally introduces Bond to Graves and his publicist Miranda Frost. I've heard folks say that this cameo was the single worst thing in the film, but honestly I think that's been a bit over dramatic. The bloody theme song is much worse than this, and Madonna thankfully doesn't get much of a chance to exhibit her lack of acting skills and disappears from the scene as quickly as she enters. We're then treated to one of the out and out highlights of the movie in the form of an ever escalating fencing battle between Bond and Graves. Bond reveals that he knows Gustav Graves' backstory doesn't check out and that his signature diamonds are actually conflict. Graves doesn't take too kindly to this assumption though and goes on a rampage.
You want to continue?
Of course I want to bloody continue!
He ends up turning a simple duel into a full-on sword fight. Half the club gets destroyed as the pair move from cutlasses to sabres and finally onto broadswords as they try to take each other's fucking heads off. It's a genuinely thrilling fight scene with all the action being in camera and very well filmed as both actors really give it their all. Frost puts an end to the battle and before you know it the two are back to being best pals soon after, with Graves even inviting Bond to Iceland for a scientific demonstration codenamed Icarus. Bond is then delivered a key for an abandoned underground station where he meets up with M. They discuss this upcoming Icarus launch party as just being a publicity stunt, and Graves' Iceland diamond mine has just been a front for African conflict diamonds. M completely changes her tune here, and with her suspicions in Graves ever growing, she restores Bond's 00 status so he can officially investigate this shit-eating tycoon.
Maybe it's time you let me get on with my job.
Everything looks to be back to normal as we see Bond resting in his office cleaning his Walther when all of a sudden there's a mass attack on MI6. I can't even imagine what first time viewers would have made of this sudden dark turn when watching it in the cinemas back in the day. Of course, the filmmakers soon pull the rug out from under us as it's shown to all be a very advanced virtual reality training system as Bond is just wandering around Q's lab with sunglasses on. Regrettably, this is the first in a long line of humongous elephants in the room. John Cleese returns in this outing as Q, and quite honestly, I like him well enough in the part. He's no Desmond Llewellyn, but he was introduced in the previous film, so there's nothing jarring about his appearance, but instead it's a nice example of continuity. We get a sneak peek at multiple of Bond's past gadgets in Q's office, and quite frankly, this little scene would have done nicely as a major nod to the series.
Does this still work?
Now look.
Bond soon gets equipped with a handy sonic ring and an invisible Aston Martin. What the fuck? Look, I know this Vanish's introduction is pretty much the turning point in this film, but truth be told, I don't have all that many issues with the car itself. It's the perfect kind of car for Bond to be driving, and I just don't understand why the filmmakers insisted that it had to have an invisibility cloak. There have been hints that the film is shifting away from the dark gritty tone we were blessed with back in North Korea, but this high-tech nonsense straight up launches the film into sci-fi territory. At least Bond himself looks as bemused as the audience when he sees it, and the scene does end with a diverting wee skit as Bond destroys the 10,000 page manual with target and machine guns. We then see M in her office where it appears she is about to give Bond his mission briefing for his Iceland assignment, but instead we see that Miranda Frost is in fact working for MI6 too. She's been undercover for a while now trying to dig up some dirt and Graves, but it's come up with hee-haw in that time. Either she's a shite agent or isn't the goody two-shoes we've been witness to so far. All will soon become clear as she's been sent out to Iceland to partner Bond in his mission, and this is where things really start to take a turn for the absolute absurd. We're immediately assaulted by some tacky editing trickery and some god-awful looking visual effects as Bond approaches the Ice Palace, and a shot that looks more like something out of an aftershave commercial. It's almost like a different crew helmed the second half of this movie, as we're barely a minute in and already get an absolute stinker of a pun.
I missed the kill.
Well, there's a name to die for.
This Mr. Killfella is a sorry excuse for a heavy. He appears out of nowhere and doesn't leave any lasting impression beyond his cringe-worthy death in the near future. We see Graves power along the landscape in another contraption straight out of a fantasy novel. He exits his land speeder and gets into another heated discussion with Bond, boasting that he never sleeps and is forced to make his dreams a reality. The script is really taking a nosedive by this point, and I'm just glad that we can hear Bond order his vodka martini later that night, but even that has a forced pun tacked on to the end of it.
Vodka martini. Plenty of ice, if you can spare it.
As Jinx arrives undercover as a space magazine writer, things really stray into the field of self-parody as the tragic one-liners begin to dominate the whole picture.
I take it Mr. Bond's been explaining his Big Bang Theory.
Oh, yeah, I think I got the thrust of it.
I see.
Graves then takes to the stage and proudly reveals his new orbital mirror satellite, which he claims can harness solar energy and act as a second sun, in turn putting an end to hunger. The crowd fall for this pantomime aside from Bond, who decides to go snooping with the help of his Harry Potter car. Zal soon arrives on site in a costume that's been sucked right out of the Matrix, and it's finally revealed that he's working with Graves because he is Colonel Moon, as I explained earlier. Just going back to it though, it's insane to think that Moon survived that fall in the pre-titles, concocted this whole gene swapping scheme, went through with the idea, and has been able to rise as a popular public figure, all within 14 months. I mean, he's even been knighted by the Queen for fuck's sake. I mean, come on to fuck. Anyway, we see Graves resting under another psychedelic mask called the Dream Machine as the two catch up, but are soon alerted to Bond's presence as he gets into a fist fight straight away. The alarm is triggered and armed guards come out to end Bond when all of a sudden Miranda Frost comes to the rescue. I just don't understand this moment. Mr. Kill and his men clearly know that Bond was snooping on the property, but just wander away and let him be because he started kissing Frost. To add insult to injury, the love-making scenes between these two actors come off all wrong. Rosamund Pike is refreshing in the role as Frost, but she was only in her early 20s here at the time of filming, and it comes across as rather creepy when Brosnan tells her to.
Come on, put your back into it, huh?
The two head straight back to Bond's room and keep up the charade of being lovers and strip bare arse to get it on. What the hell is happening here now? If it's all an act, why are they bollock naked and sleeping together? I think even the screenwriters lost touch with reality here. Jinx later attempts to stealthily sneak away into Graves' domain, but she gets instantly captured by Graves himself, who electrocutes her with his 10,000 volt armoured sleeve made by Vlad. Oh aye, Vlad. Quite honestly, I didn't feel the need to even mention this wee lackey before. He's a tech guy who just does whatever Graves asks of him and comes off as a pointless inclusion by the time he meets his doom. Once again, the editor has a field day slowing down the footage as Zal tries to get info on who Jinx is working for, but instead he divulges information about the diamond mine being faked to her before giving up and permitting Mr. Kill to laser her to death. Bond resurfaces, gets his act together and makes his way into the same area by swimming under the ice. I really do love this short moment of Bond cutting through the ice and swimming into the diamond mine with the help of the rebreather from Thunderball. Some of the shots here are stunning, but I don't quite get how the underwater lake leads straight into this bubbling pool inside the facility. It's a stroke of luck that Mr. Kill must have went to the chippy or something, because he's left Jinx cuffed to this table with the laser moving towards her at a snail's pace. This whole homage to Goldfinger is really undercooked. The laser looked great in that film and that whole scene was a highlight of that movie. This crap is just a dud. Mr. Kill returns for the shops and leathers Bond before he can save Jinx's life. The lasers go fucking haywire and I'm always half hoping that one of them will slice Jinx in two so we can get rid of her pointless character. Obviously that doesn't happen. Instead she gets a control panel and fires one of the lasers right through Mr. Kill's skull, sizzling his brain and looking embarrassingly bad in the process. They both figure out exactly what is going on, finally, and escape from this area by crudely cutting off Kill's hand and using it to open the door. Fucking hell. So Jinx is sent to get Miranda Frost, while Bond, at long last, comes face to face with Colonel Moon once again. I think it's just because I can't think of Graves as the same character as before, but not for 1 second I feel any deep hostility between these two characters. I really do wish that it just brought back William Lee in some form as the main antagonist, as he had a much more intimidating presence than Toby Stephens. The two have some more futile verbal sparring before Frost appears and holds Graves at gunpoint also. Bond always looks so smug here that it's amusing to see his face drop as we find out that Miranda was actually Moon's Western contact, who blew Bond's cover in North Korea and led to his 14-month-long captivity. I do love how Bond just thinks, fuck it, and pulls the trigger immediately, but you guessed it, she didn't just empty Bond the previous night, but also the ammo on his gun, so he looks like a right idiot here. Zal joins him and Bond is about to be executed once again. Luckily he has his sonic ring to shatter the floor and escape the diamond mine.
But it really is death for breakfast.
Say what you will about the excessive gadgets crammed into Die Another Day, but this ring is absolutely fantastic and gets a couple of great payoffs, this being the main one. David Arnold's score goes absolutely insane as Bond gets the hell out of that place and hops aboard Graves' rocket car, knowing it's just about the fastest bloody vehicle on the planet. I'm not certain what Bond's plan is here as he just speeds away as fast as he can from the ice palace. Things then go apeshit though as Graves fires up his Icarus satellite and launches the power of the sun down onto the ice. A giant god-awful CGI laser chases Bond to the edge of a glacier where he's hanging on by the skin of his teeth thanks to a grappling hook. Instead of just focusing the beam on Bond himself and burning him to a crisp, Graves tries to be too clever and cut a section of the ice away to drop him down into the depths below. This whole scene is absolute drivel and an on-screen representation of the film's quality literally going off a cliff. Mind you, it looks like a masterpiece compared to the full-on CGI assault we're served up straight after. I mean, yeah, we get this utterly laughable scene of Brosnan in front of a green screen, supposedly windsurfing a tsunami to safety. The filmmaker should have slammed the door shut on this idea as soon as it was brought up, because this looked beyond dated back in 2002. This is fake as fuck. Bond steers himself up an ice ramp and drops safely back to land as Jinx gets herself captured again. I mean, come on to hell. After trying to shove the fact that she's Bond's American equal down our throats, why are they letting her get captured every time the plot advances 5 minutes? So Bond clotheslines a randomer driving a snowmobile about 20 miles away from the ice palace, steals his ride and heads back to try and free Jinx from the villain's lair. I love how it's taken almost 24 hours for some passerby to crash into Bond's invisible car, which is just sitting out in the middle of the snow. He could at least have parked it somewhere in case the invisibility malfunctioned. That doesn't matter though, as we're then fired into the undisputed best scene in the entire movie. This car chase with Zal was a breath of fresh air after the CGI heavy shite from a few minutes ago, and there's some breathtaking shots of the cars weaving around the ice lakes as Arnold's amazing score blares. Not even some really dodgy speed ramps can put a dampener on this set piece, as it's top notch. I think it's safe to say we're all in agreement that the finest moment of this whole chase, and probably the movie, is when Bond uses his ejector seat to flip the Aston Martin and narrowly avoid an incoming missile. It's a rare moment of sheer brilliance in a film that's laced with utter dross. With Bond's invisibility camouflage damaged, he has to outrun Zal and wait for the system to restore. Graves is boarded his personal Antonov aircraft and set the Icarus beam on the Ice Palace, with Jinx still trapped inside. Bond heads to the palace and the two of them destroy it while it melts round about them. The invisibility cloak is soon restored and Bond uses it to his advantage as Zal capsizes into the ice. It then gets a rather fitting death with a diamond chandelier getting shot down to impale him. Honestly, compared to everything round about it, these scenes are just so good. Bond then utilises his sonic ring once again, unfortunately also saving Jinx once again, and witnesses Graves take off in his massive aircraft. So fast forward God knows how long, as Bond and Jinx join the rest of MI6 in a Korean base, where it's agreed that the two of them are the only chance of stopping Graves' diabolical plan. So now Jinx is officially teamed up with 007. Hooray! So she's going to be by his side for the rest of the film. That's exactly what we want to hear. They drop down to the Korean peninsula via some made up transportation called Switchblades, which is once again put in front of some terrible CGI. They land at an airbase and stow away in the Antonov as it's taken off, having missed their chance to assassinate Graves right there and then. They really are making a hash of this. Graves has his father sent to him and reveals his identity and true purpose of Icarus to him and the audience. I know this is meant to be an emotional scene as we watch the General slowly discover the monster his son has become, but it comes across as pure comedy. The biggest laugh comes when Graves turns around wearing this futuristic Robocop suit that is linked to the Icarus satellite. I mean, look at this crap. It's complete tripe. So Graves' master plan is to use a solar beam to carve a path through the Korean DMZ, allowing North Korea to invade their southern neighbours and pretty much start World War III. His father looks totally disgusted by his ginger son's plans and tries to put a stop to proceedings. He's given 10,000 volts however and killed by his own son, in a moment that feels like it's trying to get us all to shed a tear, with absolutely no success of course. Bond is lurking in the shadows watching these events unfold and thinks enough's enough, but before he can even set his sights on Graves, he's shoved off target and shoots out a window. This causes the whole plane to depressurise and descend at the speed of light. Jinx has fortunately taken control of the flight and manages to stabilise it with little trouble, even though I'm pretty certain she's not a pilot. Back in the fuselage, half the fuckers aboard the flight are sucked into orbit as Bond and Graves are sent rolling around the place in spectacular fashion before control is regained. Miranda Frost sneaks up on Jinx with a sword and forces her to turn the autopilot on. Jinx obviously doesn't give a damn about living through this mission as she sets the course into the Icarus beam that is currently destroying the DMZ. As always, shit well and truly goes down as the plane enters the path of the beam and starts getting torn to shreds. Both parties get locked in a brawl, with the girls' one actually being more entertaining thanks to some skillful stunt work and a pretty solid death scene.
I can read your every move. Read this! Bitch.
Things aren't so swell with the fellas, as Graves is just constantly electrocuting Bond with his suit and spouting off ridiculous one-liners that sound like something out of a stage play.
Oh look! Parachutes for the both of us! Whoops! Not anymore!
2 parachutes in a whole cargo plane? That might be the most unrealistic thing about this whole sequence. In the end, Bond pulls Graves' parachute inside the burning flight and somehow self-electrocutes him with his own suit, leading to him getting sucked straight into one of the gigantic engines. Like, if you can ignore the downright dreadful CGI, this is actually a pretty half-decent finale, but that's a very big if, because the dodgy effects tend to dominate the screen throughout this whole climax. So Graves is a goner, the Icarus beam is off and there's nothing left to do but escape the flaming flight. This is just a minor gripe of mine, but why the hell is M present in a Korean bunker as the Icarus beam destroys everything nearby? A presence in the field made sense and the world is not enough, but this just seems like they found any old way to cram her into the plot again. So anyway, Bond and Jinx make their escape by leaping into a helicopter at the back of the cargo plane and manage to start it up in mid-air as a massive computer particles pass them by outside. I know the windsurfing scene is often pointed out as the biggest offender in the whole movie, but quite honestly this cock and bull may be even worse. Not for 1 second do I believe a single thing I'm seeing on screen, and it's crystal clear Pierce and Halle were given next to no direction in the studio, as they just look lost here. But of course they survive the ordeal and come out the other side laughing, as this chopper conveniently contains all of Gustav Graves' diamonds. Mind you, they are conflict diamonds, so their state of happiness is a little questionable. They fly off to safety, and for some insane reason we switch back to MI6 to watch a horny Moneypenny get it on with Bond, thanks to Q's virtual reality glasses. And man, is this one final kick in the balls. Samantha Bond's Moneypenny has done a full 180 during Brosnan's 4 films and ends up 10 times raunchier than she ever was previously. So with that crap by with, we really end things off by seeing Bond hang out in some Buddhist temple with Jinx, living the good life surrounded by a shitload of conflict diamonds. Wait, this is even worse. To add to this shit pile, Pierce Brosnan bows out of the role with one of the lamest whimpers you're ever likely to witness on screen.
Oh, so good.
Especially when you're bad.
His final lines as 007 are arguably the most atrocious to ever be uttered. Well, there you have it. That was Pierce Brosnan's 4th and final outing as James Bond, and is it the wretched steaming pile of shit that most fans will have you believe, or is Die Another Day an underrated gem in the series? Well, it's actually quite hard to say. The god-awful script and over-reliance on wonky CGI occasionally drag the movie into the abyss, but I honestly feel there's a great deal to enjoy in this schizophrenic escapade. You can tell that Pierce Brosnan is trying his damnedest to glue this mess of a film together throughout, but when the screenplay descends into demeaning self-parody, there's not a hell of a lot he can do to elevate the material. It's a sin because it actually appears like he may be getting the dark, emotional Bond story that he openly craved since he took on the role, but that all soon goes soaring out the window. He plays the captivity scenes so well, but those amount to about 10 minutes of the runtime. After that, he's back to his usual quipping self and never gets a chance. The plot goes absolutely nowhere with this dark storyline and eventually teams him up with Halle Berry, of whom he has absolutely no chemistry with. This is surprisingly one of the movie's biggest flaws, as he spends half the time saving her bloody life. To be honest, I don't even know where to start with the plot of Die Another Day. The best thing I can say is that it's fairly easy to follow and moves along at a respectable pace. Other than that, it's pretty much indefensible. Once the gene therapy clinics and space lasers are introduced, it evokes memories of Diamonds Are Forever and Moonraker, which are probably not the films you would go to when borrowing plot elements. By the time we reach Iceland, the whole narrative just buckles under its own ridiculous weight. In terms of the characters we meet along the way, they're pretty much the definition of a right mixed bag. William Lee was fantastic as the original Colonel Moon, but he gets snubbed to hell and replaced by the sneering ginger ponce Gustav Graves. In fairness, I do like Toby Stephens and he does play it well. I just think he was written to be a spoilt British brat. The biggest mistake is that we don't get any visible linkage between him and Moon from the pre-titles. They don't act remotely the same and it pushes the absolute limits of narrative believability. Zal and Frost I actually like. They aren't given any particularly significant personality traits worth mentioning, but they're both memorable enough villains that look the part. Jinx on the other hand, oh boy. I know fine well I've made it abundantly clear that I don't like her character or Halle Berry's acting at any point in the film. She comes across as so obnoxious with her sassy American style, and it's made so much worse by the fact that we're constantly asked to treat Bond and Jinx as equals, because it just draws attention to the fact that they're clearly not. The action in the film is the definition of excess. There may not be quite as many action set pieces compared to the last 2 installments, but each one we do get is more extravagant than the last. I thoroughly enjoy the hovercraft chase through the minefield, Bond's Fast and Furious sword fight with Graves, and especially that cool as shit car chase in the frozen ice lake, but my god did they get ridiculous. Just about every set piece is one single part that almost spoils the whole thing. Some unwarranted CGI moments that's thrown in just for the hell of it, and it kinda drives me nuts. Then of course you have the infamous segments that dive straight into science fantasy. Halfway through the film it turns into a cartoon. If an invisible car and land speeder being chased by the sun wasn't bad enough, we also have to deal with Bond surviving a tsunami by windsurfing through an obvious soundstage. It's all absolutely ridiculous, with the climax on Graves' plane being the biggest offender in many ways. Gone are the days where the Bond franchise was revered for doing many things for real. New Zealand director Lee Tamahori seemed obsessed with creating the most outrageous action film ever, loaded with excessive special effects, clunky speed ramps and slow-mo in the edits, and I get the feeling that the blame for most of the film's absurdities should lay directly at his feet. So, with all that being said, I most definitely think this is the worst Bond film of all time then, right? No. Not even close. You see, for all the film's countless flaws, there's two things it always has going for it. It's insanely entertaining and completely rewatchable. I genuinely do believe the first half of the film to be solid, but even when the film does repeatedly jump the shark once things shift to Iceland, I can't help but lap up all the ludicrous eye candy on screen. It is a real shame that the filmmakers couldn't carry the purposeful tone presented at the beginning of the movie through the whole outing, as things generally do go from grounded to invisible cars in a relatively short time frame. But still, it's one hell of a ride. Going through the whole film like I did, it is almost impossible not to rip it limb from limb, but when all was said and done, I always look back on what I just watched with a real fondness. I would pin Die Another Day as my biggest guilty pleasure movie, and one that can be thoroughly enjoyed if you think on it as a huge event. It went balls to the wall on celebrating everything that came before it and cranked every single element of production up to 11. It's relentless in its absurdity, and I don't really have much of a problem with that 20 years on, but I obviously see why many others do. Die Another Day perfectly demonstrated how far things had shifted since GoldenEye, and why the franchise was in need of an imminent reboot, which came in the form of Casino Royale 4 years later. So there we are. That's all of Pierce Brosnan's 007 outings discussed and reviewed in some form or another. I know the Bond series is extensive as hell and I've spoken about these films in somewhat of a vacuum, but I just felt that was the best way to dive as deep as possible into this specific era of Bond. In my opinion, Pierce Brosnan was a perfect fit for the suave secret agent, and even though he received considerably more flimsy scripts and extravagant set pieces as time went on, all four of his films are still easy to digest, unapologetic fun. Or maybe I just feel that way because I grew up with these movies. Oh well. Thanks to all who watched these lengthy as shit retrospectives, and I hope you'll subscribe to the channel if you like this sort of content, as there'll definitely be more on the way shortly. But for now, I'm off to watch something that's most definitely not a bloody James Bond movie. Adios for now. Or should I say...
Goodbye, Mr. Bond.
That beat, man. Holy shit.